this story that I'm trying to introduce to this presentation is about the death of Asa, a good leader. There are two stories about the death of Asa as a king. It is widely known that Asa was killed by his brother Seth during a power struggle in which Seth won. Seth eventually decapitated Asa's bodily parts and scattered them across the land. They're known as Kemet. But when you say the land, Kemet, that was what Africa it was. But threw his followers into the river Happy to deny him the opportunity to procreate, even if he rose from death. The river Happy today is called the River Nile. This story, even though tragic as it was, had a happy ending. Seth's victory was short-lived and temporary. Asa's sister and wife, Asasi, traveled across Kemet collecting her brother and husband's mortal remains and remembered them and conjured a miracle for Asa to rise from the dead. So when they're talking about the resurrection, history has it that Asa was the first person to rise from the dead. So this modern history that indicates that it was Jesus Christ is false. Asa had risen before Jesus Christ. Another miracle was conjured for him to impregnate his wife, Asasi, without a phallus. A boy child, Heru, was born and grew up to avenge his uncle, Seth, and defeated him. He then gave his father a befitting burial and a befitting funeral and erected a bar, this, which is called obelisk by the ancient Greeks and today's language, English language. But it's called bare or tekeno. That's what the boy king erected in honor of his father. He then poured libation on it, also in his honor, before his father departed to the Neta land. Neta means God, God's land, or the land of the gods to rule thereafter. That is about the first story of Asa's death. And there is a second story. And this is even more intriguing. The second story about the death of Asa is rather more disturbing because of the circumstances and the consequences that followed. It is recorded that the death of Asa caused a global war between the northern atmosphere and the southern atmosphere, also known as the lower lands and the upper lands. The two lands went to war for the right to bury their king and leader, Asa. The war went on for months while Asa's body lay in state. A truce ensued, and an agreement was reached. Asa's body was to be cut into 2 equal parts, for each side to bury in a sacred place. Unfortunately, other fights erupted within the 2 lands, demanding some bodily parts to be given to them for burial in their respective lands. These are the consequences of good leadership, and the behavior of the people clearly showed how dearly they loved their God King. 2 stories about Asa's death. So there are consequences after the death of a good leader. And this was a leader that was both human and God. I will give you an example of a leader that was just fully human, who is now a deity or an ancestor in a minute. So this is Asa and the consequences that came after his death, as I just enumerated. Now, this is one human being that, if you look at it, almost caused a regional war in West Africa, and that is Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. In modern times, this story is vivid as yesterday. Good leaders, upon death, have forgone this problem. In April of 1972, when one of Africa's leaders died in Bucharest, Romania, the government of Guinea under President Sékou Touré claimed his mortal remains for interment. The father of African nationalism, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who was by then co-president of Guinea after being overthrown 6 years earlier by the armed forces of Ghana. The Guinean authorities' claim of Nkrumah's mortal remains from Romania angered the Ghanaian authorities. Nkrumah was not just Ghana's favorite son. He was a founder of the nation. Nkrumah has been Ghana's first prime minister and president, and no nation besides Ghana had any rights to his mortal remains. The Romanian authorities, with no good reason to deny the Guinean claim, handed Nkrumah's mortal remains to them. Guinea then declared a day of mourning with a dignified state burial. But that was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the intrigue. African Students' Union in London feared that the total emancipation of Africa has come to a dead end if Guinea kept Nkrumah's body, thus triggering a regional war. The students sent a memo to Guinea asking that the body of the late president be returned to Ghana only if the then military government denounces coup d'etats and re-erect the statue of Kwame Nkrumah that was toppled down during the 1966 coup. The 4-month government under Colonel I.K. Achampong, the National Redemption Council, NRC, dispatched a high-powered delegation to Guinea to make a counterclaim of Kwame Nkrumah's mortal remains. Led by the firebrand Major C.D. Benny, the delegation made it abundantly clear that the demand from Guinea could not be denied. It was not just a threat. Ghana was ready to go to war if that was the only way to get Nkrumah's body back home. Even though Ghana does not share natural borders with Guinea, in 1992, Ghana's Air Force was capable of delivering a punch on the Guinean capital, Conakry. Eventually, President Secretary relented and Nkrumah's body was returned to Ghana. His body was first interred at his hometown, Nkrofo, and 20 years later, his image was restored and finally laid to rest permanently on July 1, 1992, in a magnificently constructed mausoleum in the national capital, Accra. So you can see that when you have good leadership, when you die, there can even be a war. It's like the difference between anger and euphoria. When people are euphoric, they destroy things. When people are angry, they destroy things. Euphoria is happiness over happiness. Anger is anger. But the two are almost similar. So good leadership can end up causing the people of the land some havoc. The God Assa's death and the consequences that have left a lasting, indelible mark. Let me go over that. The God Assa's death and the consequences that ensued have left a lasting, indelible mark. And the African people of Ghana and Guinea experienced it after the death of a good leader named Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, without even knowing its antecedents. So that's why it's good to know history. Because if you cannot connect the dots, you couldn't tell why Ghana was ready to fight Guinea for somebody's dead body. It started with the god Assa. This is the goddess Ma'at. The goddess Ma'at was responsible for another code of conduct by human beings. And these were called the 42 negative confessions or declarations of Ma'at. Ma'at was an ancient